This is Tennessee Talks with United States Congressman Tim Burchett.
Hey everybody, it's Congressman Tim Burchett back for another episode of Tennessee Talks. Today we are joined by my very good friend, Hallerin Hill, call him Al, or H, as sometimes I call him. He graduated from Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama. He didn't have to learn an accent when you got here. Where he studied communications. He's a radio talk show host, motivational speaker, singer, songwriter, and producer. You won what award did you win? What was the big one?
I was nominated.
I
was nominated for a Grammy.
For a Grammy. Well, how many times was I nominated for a Grammy? Zero. You know, he's been a top-rated host for more than 25 years and voted best talk show host by his loyal listeners. He's named one of America's top talk show hosts by Talkers Magazine and is inducted in the Tennessee Radio Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He has worked with renowned artists such as Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston, which is pretty cool. That is pretty cool, man. Again, can't say that about anybody else. He's also the CEO and founder of Wisdom House, a multimedia company focused on inspiring people around the world to grow in wisdom. And I want to thank you, Hal, for joining me. It's great to have you on the show. I guess I should start off by saying that I would probably not be sitting here as a congressman in my role, but if it wasn't for you. I was in the mulch business. You can Google it. They make something out of it every campaign year, but it doesn't go anywhere because the people around here knew the story, and nobody would let me tell my story. And in the early days of then talk radio, which was kind of a new thing around here, there was Rush Limbaugh and there was Hallerin Hill. And that was it.
We were here at the beginning.
Yeah, and it was down on Kingston Pike, and I was talking to a reporter, and you said, "Hey, you want to tell your story?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And you let me tell my story, and that literally wasn't edited. It wasn't, editorialized, and that just turned the tide. And I ended up losing the business still, which was probably wouldn't have been able to stop that at any point. But the overwhelming support of this public and allowing me just to tell my story. I don't know where I'd be right now. I'd probably be sitting on a bar stool down at Toddy's Backdoor Tavern, probably, and I don't drink, so that'd have been a tall order for me. But I had great parents, and from there on, Mom and Daddy thought of you as practically one of their own. They would, my buddy Hal or whatever. But tell me about your start, Hal. How you got here. That is a great story. It's a great American story.
Well, first, I can't take any credit for how you've been able to serve and how you found your way to public service like this, because I know what you're cut from. I know where you come from. You were going to be the mulch king. You were going to be king of something. Because your parents, you brought them up first. Man, I have such love and respect for your mother and your father, and they showed me so much love. I came to Knoxville as of the time of this taping 33 years ago, and I came here with nothing. I lived in the
I remember 33 years old was as old, man. That senior citizens or something.
So to be here 33 years later and still kind of chugging along, but I didn't have anything. I'd been in the United States Virgin Islands. I was general manager of a radio station there. I was in my dream job, actually. I was living on the ocean. Hurricane Hugo comes through. Our radio station was deeply affected, and I was actually at the time.
And how old were you?
I was 24, 25 years old. And I was also invested with some people to try to buy my first radio station or get my first license, and those people turned out to be full of shenanigans.
I understand. Maybe it's best that deal didn't go through.
But as a result of the hurricane and that, I showed up here 33 years ago unemployed. I was living in one room at my sister's house in Mechanicsville. I had a bunch of resumes, business cards. I bought a blue suit.
Is that house still here?
It is. It's right there on the corner, right across the street from Knoxville College.
I know Knoxville College. My mama taught there.
Randolph Street.
Yeah, Randolph. Absolutely. Wow.
Randolph. And but I would ride the bus every day looking for work. And one day I walked into WIVK. Jean Ash was upstairs, and she was about to go on a trip, and they were telling her she might have to work through the holidays. She was pitching a fit, and I looked at James Dick and I said, "Why don't you use me as caulk? Let me plug the hole. I've done everything from take out the garbage to manage radio stations." So, and he said something to me that two things. He said, "You take her to lunch, and if you can get her to agree that you should replace her, we may consider it." And he said, "Two, you haven't said anything about money." And I said, "I don't get to say anything about money until I show you I can create value. This is your business." And he was like, So I called the humanities department at UT and asked how to say hello in Mandarin. And at Daryl's restaurant on Bearden Hill, I walk in, got there an hour early because I had to ride the bus. Jean Ash walks in and I go, "Ni hao." And she goes, "You know Chinese?" I said, "Nope, I'm sucking up." I need a job. And they took a chance on me, $6.80 an hour on a 90-day temporary basis. And 33 years later, I've been there longer than anybody in the building now. And we just keep going.
And of course, Bobby Denton, bigger than life kind of guy. I always remembered, it's dangerous when you start reminiscing, you know, with Bobby. I was going in to cut a commercial and I didn't know anything about it. And I just come off the mulch pile and I was running for the legislature and I smelt a cigar. And I looked over and Bobby Denton, and he always would leave. Hey, he goes, hey, compost, what are you doing? And he said, "Hey, Mr. Denton." I said, "It's Bobby." And I said, "Yes, sir." I mean, he was gruff, but he came from nothing.
Yeah, absolute nothing.
And he understood. He's really missed. But he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm doing a radio. I'm trying to get a radio. I don't know. I'm just kind of out of my league. And I said, "Look, I just don't want to get taken advantage of." He said, "Let me see that." And he goes, "Hang on for a second." He put his cigar down on the ledge right there. You know where it's at. And I know
exactly where you're talking about.
And I walked out, and we walked in. And he said, "I'll be up." And I think it said Studio 2. And he goes, "Hang on for a second." And he says, "Come on." And he goes, Let me see. Here, what's your script?" And he showed him, and he said, Let me make a few changes here. Let me do this." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he cut that radio ad for me, and it was golden. One take. It's just, I was, but that was, Knoxville is the smallest big town you'll ever be a part of.
Right.
And you were part of something that Mr. Dick, that family meant so much to this community.
They meant so much to me. I was telling somebody the other day that America is a place of hope. And hope, the verb, is desire accompanied by confident expectation. Hope, the noun, is the person or place of last resort. And I remember I was studying the miracles of Christ in the Bible. I think there are 33 or 36 miracles. At any rate, you would always run into somebody who had hope, and they ran into someone who was hope. And whenever that intersection happened, miracles happened. And when I came to Knoxville, I really did believe in the American dream. I thought if you get after it, things could happen for you. But then I ran into a lot of people who were willing to be agents of hope for me. They gave me a shot. They believed in me, and they conspired on my behalf in ways I didn't know. I didn't realize what they were doing behind the scenes, but a couple of people were like, "Man, we like this kid." And my career in East Tennessee is an anomaly. There's been nothing like it. And number one, that's by the grace of God, first and foremost. But then some people actually, they really helped me.
Tell me a little bit about your mama and daddy. We talk about my mom and daddy, and I know what you're cut from as well. But if you talk a little bit about them and how they grew up and how many brothers and sisters do you have?
There were 5 of us. My oldest brother passed on.
Right. And each of them had education.
Yeah, my three brothers. Yeah, my 3 brothers were all ministers. One finished a doctorate degree. All of them got master's degrees. My sister was in healthcare. I'm the least educated of my family members.
Well, that's me. Yeah.
And
everybody wonders why I went astray.
So Daddy was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, 1923.
Right.
My mother was born in Houston County, Georgia, Perry, Georgia, in 1925.
That's where my daughter goes for barrel racing, Perry, Georgia.
They both have passed on. My father was a Seventh-day Adventist minister for 52 years. My mother was a school teacher. So I was raised in the structure of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. I attended many of their schools.
It was very rigorous.
Oh, absolutely. And my parents were, I've never lived with a political ideology. In fact, somebody told me what I was after I talked about things on the radio. I don't come to what I do with a political ideology. But, my father was like, nobody's going to give you anything. Nobody owes you anything. If you got to work for it. I'm raised up on the 10 Commandments. I'm raised up on hard work. The 3 kinds of respect for yourself, respect for God, and respect for others. 3 kinds of responsibility for yourself, your others, and your community. So when you're raised with that kind of mindset, it's not only what you're taught, but what it's caught. I just always believed you had to go get it. And so my view of America, my view of American life, my view of life in general was really guided by that framework, if that makes sense.
Very much so.
And people responded to that, I guess. I didn't know I was being anything political at all. It just was common sense. It was just like, nobody's going to do anything for you, But they were kind of like your parents, like. They believed in not having a lot of debt. They believed in paying cash if you could. They believed, all of that stuff.
I'll tell you one thing that always is my dad. It was one of these life lessons I learned. We were at Myrtle Beach, and it was before it was all developed. We stayed at Apache Campground. We get to spot number 1 right on the edge, right there at the beach. If we got there in time, we got that spot. And we'd go either 1 week if they'd saved up money 2 weeks. And it turned out during the Second World War, this was an old strafing range. So you could get out with a metal detector and find bullets back in the back, 50 caliber, 30 caliber machine gun slugs, and they're just everywhere. So Daddy, I was fishing, it was on the inlet, and Daddy would metal detect, and we'd just hang out, me and him and my brother down there, and my mama and sister off doing something else. And I remembered I fell off. I was looking at it, and I fell off the side of this thing. It was coral, and I was hanging on, and I thought, man, this is it. I was going to fall in there and bust my head, and Dad's way off somewhere. About that time, Daddy reaches over, pulls me out of that deal, dusts me off, make sure I'm bleeding a little bit. We grew up, we're kids. So
walk it off.
Yeah, walk it off. Yeah, and just don't tell your mama. You know the program. And I thought that is pretty much my parents right there. They would never let me get killed, but they'd let me get dusted up or busted up a little. Mm-hmm. But they would never, they'd step in and if they had to, but they let me fall and get myself back up. And your parents, I could see you all, falling in a mud puddle or something. They would just clean yourself.
Well, I'll give you a great example. Me going to college is a great example of that. So I was not the planned child. I was wanted. I'm the baby. There's 9 years between me and my siblings.
Right.
And they had stopped having children, but they had not stopped the process of having children.
Yeah, I dig that. I'm well aware of that.
So I show up. My dad's 40 when I'm born, and he made sure that my brothers had a way to get to college, whether he had to borrow or work or whatever. By the time they get to me, they have no money. And I remember that day. I remember the day that I had to leave college because I didn't have any money. And my father looked at me, it was my freshman year of college, and he said, I don't have it, I can't borrow it, but I expect you to figure it out. Right, so, okay. College took me 8 years. Tightwad like you will appreciate this. I paid for college in cash working 3 jobs, right?
You, me, and Dave Ramsey. You know?
But before my dad passed away, I said, Dad, why'd you tell me to just figure it out? He said, because I wanted you to know what I knew. I said, what's that? That you could, and you wouldn't know unless you had to. So I let you have to. I was like, that. And that's what you're talking about. They let you, but going through that, I developed this mindset, and I think that may have been what I connected to in you at the mulch pile. I saw the hustle. I saw somebody who was like, mulch, let me, you were figuring out a way to be an American entrepreneur.
See, now everybody does it.
Right.
It's just, everybody. You don't send it to the landfill.
It became a thing. Yeah. It was a whole thing. And you were kind of innovating. I remember you were buying those big, whatever those things
tub
are.
grinders.
Yeah, all this stuff. And you were building a business, but I saw the hustle. I saw you figuring it out. And I've always had this amazing respect. See, America should be a platform for opportunity. It is not a platform of guaranteed success, but it is a platform for opportunity. We should set the stage for people to flourish, but they got to have skin in the game. I mean, and I think that's what I connected to in you. I knew what it was like to try to make something happen.
You're like a hand up, not a handout.
Yeah.
I'm all about that. I see that all the time. We pretty much ruin kids when we do that. That's what I tell my wife. My little girl has a job. Does she have to have one? No. But, she told me the other day, she said, Dad, it's lunch hour. I can't talk. We're covered up.
I love that.
I do too, man. And I mean, she's a worker, and I dig that because I want her to be that because it's because she needs to succeed. Well, I guess one last thing, and then we'll let you go, H. I always remember this story. And it was we both lost our parents, and my daddy was 41 when I was born, and Mama was 40. So if that tells you anything, but I remembered when Daddy had his stroke and he wasn't long for the world, but we'd gotten some really bad news, and I walked out of the house, and I remember you drove by with a buddy of yours, and I can't remember who it was. Doesn't really matter. And you said, hey. I looked up and I said, Dadgummer's Hal. What's he doing in my front yard? What's going on? And he said, he said, you all right? And you said, God told me to drive by here, check on you. And I was like, phew. And I can't tell you what that meant to me, because how close I was to my folks, and I miss them every day. I mean, I still think about them, and I choke up sometimes about just the crazy sacrifices they made. And as a kid, you got a big family. We didn't have a big family. Mom and Dad were career educators, so it wasn't like, just the little things, meals and things like that, and just your mom up 3 meals a day probably.
Absolutely. I was looking at the beatings to biscuits ratio, and I thought my mother gave me a lot of beatings, but then I counted the biscuits up, and there were more biscuits than
no,
beatings,
much
right?
much more.
But your parents, you got to know this, man. When I came to Knoxville, not everybody was happy. By the way, America,
well, I
do know how to dress better than this.
No, but I do want to say this for my folks listening and watching. I got people all over the country, actually all over the world, that actually watch this thing now. But I remembered on the radio one time, and my dad and I were listening, and we kind of got tickled because it was an old redneck calling in, and it was something racially, and it was on the radio, of course, and obviously didn't know you were a black fella. And he said, and Hal, let me tell you something with these black folks. You know how they are. And I remember you said, and you kind of laughed and said, yeah, I do know how they are.
I might know a little bit about this.
And I thought, holy cow, and Dad was like, welcome to East Tennessee.
Well, I went through a lot, which I won't talk about today, but your mother and your father went out of their way to let me know that they supported and appreciated me. I mean, went out of their way. Your father used to call a radio show.
No, Mama, baby, your daddy's calling in. It was anything, my dad was a very conservative guy, as you know, and I'd say, Daddy, you're not helping me any.
Your dad used to call the radio show, but when I would be out in public, your parents would make a beeline to come and verbally express to me how much they supported and appreciated me. And in those early days, man, you have no idea what that meant to me.
I grew up in a kind of surreal thing. And one last story reminded me, I had a teacher in third grade. Her name was Miss Ross. She was a black lady. And honestly, went to West Hills Elementary School. And maybe if there was one black kid, I don't know, and there was a black custodian. And Miss Ross was black. And she wrote me a note after my mama died. And she said, Timmy, call me Timmy. I would go to the Martin Luther King Day parade, and it'd be Joe Armstrong always say it's the coldest day of the year, and surely it was. It was 15 degrees, the wind was blowing, and I look over there, and it was Miss Ross, and they were holding her up, and she was in her 90s. And she said, Timmy, do you know? I said, Miss Ross, I know, I see you, I know your eyes. I would, and so, but she wrote me a letter after Mama died, and she said, basically, it said, there I was, a black teacher in an all-white school, and your mama sent me a plate of biscuits and said,
that was your mom.
You were going to be great and fine. And I thought, and Mama never told me she did that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, that's pretty cool. That was pretty cool. And that was 1973. So, I mean, it's different. We don't even think about that stuff now. But
your parents had an innate sense of fairness. Like, we can talk left, right, red, blue, but at our core, we all are created by God. And if God is our Father, you're my brother. That's what that is.
We're made in the image of God.
And unless and until we acknowledge, realize, and lean into that, I don't know that we'll mature into the whole country that we could be. People talk about race relations. I've been talking about grace relations, because if we can put the G, God, in front of the race thing, it changes everything.
It does change everything. Well, as usual, this is why Hal is a great radio talk show. I did too much talking, and he did the listing. He opens me up too much. It's like I guess I owe you $300 an hour for this thing. I owe you $150. But anyway, no, we better roll here. We're going to run out of time. But Hallerin, it's been a pleasure, and I thank you for being my friend. And
thank you for your service too.
And if you. No, it's nothing like what you do for the community, and I cannot tell you what your friendship has meant to me. And I always remember that time we went to that gun show together, and we had, oh gosh, you talk about the head starting. And I remember, and I said, and I told Teddy Davis this. He's a dear friend of mine, the Davises. But anyway, I told him this story a couple of weeks ago. I walked in that gun show with Hal, and I thought, dadgummit. He's the only black guy in this whole place, except for one black guy who was over in the corner, who was working there. I knew that worked there, and he said, and I said, Hal, what's it like? And I said, gosh, Hal, I'm sorry. I said, what's it like? He said, dude, this is my world. This is Tuesday. This is Tuesday, yeah. But anyway, folks, been another incredible episode of Tennessee Talks. I have a lot of folks on here, and they're my friends, but Hallerin is more than a friend. He's been like a brother to me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Tennessee Talks. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Keep up with Congressman Burchett by following Rep. Tim Burchett on Twitter and Instagram, and Congressman Tim Burchett on Facebook and YouTube.